Hello there, Vector Podcast, Season 2. I hope that you were waiting for a new episode. And today I'm really happy about my guest and the topic, because in many ways we didn't cover it in depth, as much in depth as I think and hope we can cover it today. It's the topic of data, the role of data. While everyone is talking about sexy deep learning, chat GPT, learning to rank, new algorithms, and so on, I still believe that we should not forget about where all these things begin, and this is data. And I'm happy to have and welcome Evgeniya Sukhodolskaya, data advocate at Toloka, today with me. Hi, Evgeniya. How are you doing?
Thank you, Dima. Thank you. I am super happy to talk it. I'm very pre-Christmassy mood. So I'm feeling like I'm just having a little chit chat before vacation.
Yes, exactly how it should be. And I'm really happy to have you here. We met at Haystack conference, and this was great. I saw so much excitement in you when you talked about, hey, but what about data? We should also talk about it. Don't forget it. And I'm really excited to drill into this today with you. I think let's start as we usually start, with your background, and then we roll from there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, at Haystack, I think I literally like formulated my passion that I want to talk about search in the midst of the data. So I'm feeling like today I'm getting a present for Christmas. So yeah, about me, I am this person, this type of a person which got his perfect position by chance because I never knew it existed. Because I finished bachelor's in machine learning and I was like, okay, if I did so, I need to work like around it, you know. But at this point, everybody is always hyping on something in machine learning, you know. So at that point, I mean, I finished in 2019, so it was like a very big era of guns and like others, and everybody wanted to work with the computer vision, and I didn't. So I thought, okay, maybe I need to start like working somewhere in the field and see what I will like. And by some chance, I started working as a software developer. I don't know why, just, you know, like out of the blue, you're a student, you're getting your first job. Then I kind of realized after some time that I'm doing more like business analytics, talking tasks, and consulting through doing the development also. And I like both. And I was like, okay, so I don't want to be just a developer. And I switched to a position which was called technical manager, which was like something in between analyst and also a person who like manages like some projects with people. And also at that time, that was the first time I tried to do crowdsourcing, like related to our projects, because we were doing tasks about moderation. And with moderation, and actually you need a lot of data like labeled and checked on the quality because it's a very hard task. But something still was off because here I wasn't using enough machine learning. And I was like, but I studied it. Okay. Then I switched to machine learning engineer. I mean, it sounds like I'm hopping on and hopping off, but it was like some periods of time. It was amazing. I had an amazing head. I am still very grateful to him. He like taught me much about machine learning in the production. But at this point, I realized that I lost some of the knowledge that I like received back. So I applied for the master's program in the actually Munich. Now I'm studying at the Technical University of München on the also kind of machine learning program. And also I felt that I'm not speaking enough, you see. So I'm like always like speaking enough, not ML enough, not this enough. And at some point, my like colleagues who I knew back then, and they were working at that point in Toloka, they said, "Hey Jenny, how about you will work with us as a data advocate?" And I was like, "What is that?" Like, even I'm going to Germany, I am not, I don't know what is that, what it's about. And they're like, "Oh, that would be perfect for you because you can do machine learning and researching, but you also can speak." And I am so happy that it literally happened because last year and some time that I was like there working with the data, working with crowdsourcing, working with search, because I also have like some past experiences. When I was a machine learning engineer, I actually was working with the search recommendations a little bit. So all of this combined in one perfect profession. So I would say I'm a very happy person.
This is super great, and it sounds like you are in the warm waters of like what you really want to do. At the same time, I think it's still a very demanding role and field. Um, and so you are basically still doing some ML, right? But you also advocate for data. Can you expand a
Oh,
bit on what you do?
oh yeah, it's actually like everything in a like all in one, like this shampoos with conditioner and the shampoo in body wash and everything, because I have some freedom at my position to choose what I want to like study now. So for example, I chose like going to the search conferences and talk about it because I had some experience. I really love the idea of comparing crowdsourcing and machine learning models in some particular tasks. For example, let's think about the adversarial attacks. It's interesting how far we can expand with them, like detecting them by machine learning and detecting them by humans. And like these different comparisons where the crowd wins, where the like manual labeling, where the machine learning wins. It's a question which is in general interesting, especially now with ChatGPT, when everybody is like, oh my God, AI is conscious. Okay, close everything, fire all the software engineers, we are done. So it's super interesting to explore that. And I am always like reading articles about this, attending a talks about this, also doing myself some talks. Plus, of course, I am also participating in development of our company because Toloka started as a data labeling company, but now it's expanding much more in the means that we also started designing like ML tools on the top of it. Because when you're having such a resource, of like a human manual labeling in your, basically in your, I don't know how to say in your basement, but it sounds creepy. Yeah, you can use it for transfer learning or for some other like interesting tasks. And yeah, we expanded a lot, and it's very interesting to assist in these processes and to come and to talk about this, and also in the means of still manual labeling in assistance to AI and ML developing currently.
Yeah, this is fantastic. And when somebody approaches Toloka and or like maybe you just create an account, I guess, and you start, creating projects and so on. I think many things go into the process, like starting from the price, right? How economical it can be, right? Do I have any control over this? But also in terms of, for example, the outcome, the quality of labels that I will get. How do you usually sort of structure the process? Is there some general recipe that Toloka would offer to any user, and maybe on top of that you would offer some additional service, so to say, right, or advice to a company? Is there something around that you could share with us?
Or I would say I can talk non-stop, but in general, it's like this. Firstly, of course, when you're deciding that you need manual labeling for some reason, like some data sets, you need to understand that you actually need that, because it doesn't mean that for every task that they're existing, just use data-centric approach, throw in data because nothing is tops up this. That's not correct, of course. You can be free using like open source data. You can be free using synthetic data because it's cheap. You're just generating it yourself. But sometimes in a lot of domains, you don't have enough available data for some specific domains. And it's hard to gather it or generate it. Or sometimes you need a human curation over the machine learning processes, for example, for monitoring, or like with ChatGPT, for example, it's like a hot topic. I've seen such a thread in Twitter how people try to ask it for some like really really dangerous stuff and check if it will provide it, and it did. So like we still need a human curation over like the data gathered by MLAI mechanisms. So in this case, if you feel like you have a need to gather a data set for your specific problem and you don't know where to start, here it's crowdsourcing platforms. And for example, in Toloka, it is the platform which was created from engineers to engineers. So it's not about like the only model is business. So you're coming to us, we're consulting you, and you're going away. No, we're actually super happy if you're like trying to deal with it yourself, because we have an open API and it's more about mechanisms than speaking with manual labelers. It's like literally about like handling the crowds with mechanisms of filtering and etc. So usually to start, you need to register, and then we have huge tons of tutorials and education programs. And also we have a community, which like my team handles actually, and we're love there to discuss any problems or questions. But I would say like we try to implement in the platform already simple steps that help you to do it pretty intuitively without studying much, your first labeling project, and set it up and let it run. So there are like inbound instructions on every step. There are like some little video or some little text instructions telling the good practices. So we try to make it as simple. Like I actually saw it developing, because when I started using Toloka, there wasn't any of this, and now it's like impressive how they changed everything.
Yeah, I can imagine. Um, and so inside Toloka, I mean, Toloka, if I consider Toloka as the package product that I get access to, you know, inside it, I presume you have the labeling editor or component, whatever is it that you're calling it, that I can flexibly load any data format, right? And also any vertical, like from computer science to audio to text, time series maybe, and so on. Um, what does it take for, the way I imagine this in my head is that, let's say, this is a team that hasn't had experience with labeling before, but they realized the importance of it in their project. So they will not be professionals in this space. Uh, what what do they need to think about when they prepare the data? Maybe quantity, maybe you recommend them to start with smaller quantity. How should they reason about format, and should they first go and watch all the tutorials, or can they somehow intuitively follow the UI?
I would say like this, like, of course, crowdsourcing a little bit, like aligning it reminds me a little bit of training the machine learning model. You need to spend some time tuning, of course. But yeah, it's for the different data types. That's firstly addressing your like comments. It's for different data types. It's for like audio, text, video, etc. And it can be used for multiple use cases, like gathering data sets for voice assistants and like for self-driving cars, or like, as I hope we will still stick to the main name of the podcast, and we will talk about search relevance with a human labeling. But like, yeah, let's imagine your team is on the rack of creating a project, and they realized we need human labeling, but they never saw the platform. um, I would say that the most important thing to consider is to start thinking in the means of decompositioning of the task. Uh, it's a key thing in the any crowdsourcing tasks, that not like, it's pretty scalable, so the amount is not a problem. It's not that expensive. You can set up reasonable prices and it will be pretty much cheap. But the one thing that is very important, if you make task too complicated, like as you would to, for example, having in-house experts, and you can ask them whatever and they will think of the rest. Here you're working with people which are not committed specifically to provide you something more than you ask from them. So tasks should be simple, and they should be well defined. So that is the thing that you need to a little bit train on, thinking of how to decomposition task. And for example, like if you offer it to a person who is not in your area of the studies, that you will be sure that he still can do it without special pre-training, maybe just reading the instruction or like completing some exam. And the rest is pretty much covered by the platform, because now there are like specific mechanics which predefine your settings for you not making mistakes on like giving away money to the crowd, or like doing the interfacing correctly, because we try to implement as much testing in-house as possible. And the interface, the configure, like the program where you configure the interface, it is done pretty much into intuitive sense. So you don't have to like learn JavaScript or HTML. If anything, it's done just in basic building blocks, which can be like changed in places and grouped together in some nice looking interface. So I hope the most of the burden is just to start thinking differently. It's like, it's like with programming. Sometimes there was a moment when I learned Haskell in my life, and I had to completely like reprogram my mind because it's such a different language in the means of programming. You need to think differently. The same is with crowdsourcing. You need to think of decomposing. That is the most important thing.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah. Haskell, functional, mathematical.
Yeah, it's so, my God.
Yes. But probably beautiful too. Yeah, this sounds great. So it does sound like a self-service in many ways. And now that you called out search, which is also very dear to my heart, and I'm glad it is the same for you. So let's start with the basics, like I have a search engine, I have users, I've got logs, right? So what I can do is that I can actually record for every search the position where the click happened, right? So what we returned, what was the click? And so I have plenty of data, assuming I have plenty of users. Why do I need another data set? Can you convince me? What am I missing?
Oh, here I would say manual labeling is much more about not creating a new data set from the scratch, but evaluating your abilities of ranking your queries in your search correctly. Because as far as I understand, a lot of there are like a lot of ranking very sophisticated algorithms existing now in search engines. They starting from the simple like search, like I don't know, assign similarity between like document and a query and everything, which was like some past time. Now people are creating vector databases, and it's super sophisticated. But still, we have search, we have recommendations, we have like some order of queries which user expects to receive. I mean, user doesn't expect to receive some order, but user expects to see the right answer as like closer to him as possible, not like searching through the 5 pages. So for that, specifically human evaluation on top of the implicit signals evaluation, like clicking, it's very crucial. And I can try to elaborate on that. How do you think, like from your perspective, like do we need if like you're creating a search engine, do you think we need also to make humans see the like ranking results, or you think that clicks and buys, if we're talking about ecom, is enough?
Well, if I continue to play the devil's advocate, you are the data advocate. I'm the devil's advocate here. In principle, I already have users, so they will tell me with their clicks. They vote with clicks, right? So I might as well just measure, the sort of the plot this click-through rate or something else, and then see what's going on, right? So that will be my probably online metric. But I guess when you talk about human labeling, you infer that there is an importance in offline evaluation as well, right?
Oh yeah, I am like, this asking this rhetorical question, like we need it, right? Right. But actually I can give some motivation behind it. So actually it's a very interesting thing about what human clicks actually mean. We can return to it because recently I had this meetup about biases, and it was also about like human clicking. And one of the very interesting talks that we had at our meetup was about like position bias. So the humans are just tend to click on something that they are offered because they're taught that the thing that offered like at the top positions are exactly what they need. But it doesn't mean that that's exactly what they need. And they may be dissatisfied with that, but they're just learned to like, follow the general way of how search engines and the e-com search engines work. So technically, online metrics, they make a lot of sense, of course, because like by clicks and by buys, you can predict most of the behavior, and it's pretty fast and it's automated. I mean, like A/B testing, blah, blah, everybody knows that. The one thing that it doesn't cover, it's firstly explicit signals. Like you can't talk by the clicks and buys at the whole overall about the human satisfaction, the satisfaction score, because it's not like they are explicitly asked in general, like, do you like this? Do you like this search result? Maybe you wanted something else. Maybe you wanted more. Maybe you wanted to be recommended something else. And yeah, the other things that sometimes, like if we're like doing some assumption about the like in A/B testing, for example, that we change some interface and we're doing by some clicks and by some assumption, sometimes we can by introducing new features pretty much hurt our product, because it's happening in real life and users see the changes. They're like the ranking, how it differs now with the new feature, and they're getting super like dissatisfied. And humans, they're not like, forgiving easily. Like if they see problems in your search engine, they might say, I'm not using it again. No, thank you. So some reasons of why would offline labeling be better, you can experiment much more on it, because like, oh, have you noticed the feature in Zoom that if I'm doing that, it's actually noticing by the neural network and offers me this. That is amazing. Oh my
I didn't
God.
know that.
Okay,
Testing
that's,
life.
yeah, we're really in the, like, this is the time of the artificial everything. So
Yeah.
I got super amused, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's good. It's
So
good. It's serendipity.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So firstly, with offline labeling, you can definitely experiment more, because you can try different features without harming the end-to-end users of your system, of your engine. And secondly, you can check how they're satisfied, what they do like, actually explicitly ask them, what do you think about this? Because when you're just guessing their behavior by their like some implicit things like where the eyes look and how much they click, you can do much more mistakes, because, as it says, we can't get into another's human head, but we can at least try to ask, and then that probably will be closer to the reality.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so what you're saying is that because usually in search engines, in a way, we skip that step of asking, yeah, we could integrate some give thumbs up or thumbs down approach, but it might also be still rather implicit and not explaining everything we want to get. But
Like,
basically, yeah.
I just remember that I was reading pretty much interesting articles recently about the recommendation systems and implementing in them, using them more about behaviorism of the people, like not just giving them the most popular result or the most desired by the similar by some features result, like in the collaborative filtering. But sometimes we need to give humans the result that they are not thinking of, but it will make their, like, for example, health or life better. Because this problem of recommender systems, when you're like used to clicking on something, at some point recommender system starts offering you the same pool of things. You're kind of stuck in this.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, using more, like, sometimes, and the authors of this paper, they were suggesting that we need to sometimes ask humans explicitly, uh, did they like what they were recommended, and do they understand why it was recommended to them, and maybe they want to change track of the recommendations. So that's why we shouldn't stick just to online metrics. But yeah, also the second grand reason why offline metrics are good, you can experiment without harm very fast, because like online metrics, they're usually taking like 2 weeks or something. You need to wait for the statistical tests to make some like results which are significant. And here you can test it much more faster, and you can perform even offline A/B testing by the offline manual label data, which will cause less harm because the real users won't see your mistakes.
Yeah, I think this strikes a chord with me for sure. So it's like you don't really, because there is always a cost to pay when you go online, that you actually deliberately potentially harming someone's experience to learn whether your is it called contrafactual, like your change in the algorithm is good or bad.
Yeah, it reminds me, I am sorry, I'm so talkative today, but it reminds me of the when I was working in moderation of advertisements. Here, it's very crucial to make mistake online because there are like two different options. Otherwise, you're like showing to the end-to-end users the advertisements with things which are like you aren't supposed to show, like drugs, I don't know, some buffoonery, some yellow news, something that is like dangerous or just like stupid. On the other hand, if you're not letting some like through the moderation, some healthy content through, you're losing money of the companies which are like having a deal with you and your own. So here you need to be very cautious with any online experiments. You pretty much doing everything online or offline, and you need to very much monitor how your machine learning algorithms doing the evaluation, because environment changes a lot in like in the advertisement world. New laws are incoming very fast. People are like they are impressively good at avoiding all of the boundaries when they need to fraud something. So imagine every day there are like new existing algorithms of creating some advertisements which are passing the machine learning algorithm blocking the fraud and everything. So you need to adapt very fastly, and for that for offline experimenting, you of course need offline data and offline labeling very much.
Yeah, I slowly start to wake up from my devil's advocate role. So so I should stop being careless and not only rely on the data that I see in production, because in a way it's like prime time for my product, and I should be careful about it's not just deploying something once and it stays there forever and ChatGPT takes care of everything. But it actually is something that I will need to evolve. And this is where the crowdsourcing approach may help me to do more economical, more less intrusive as well. This is really good. Let's maybe try to make it a little bit more concrete, right? And let's emulate. Let's play this game. Can you verbally visualize, describe? Let's say I'm developing a I don't know, flower search engine. I don't want to say e-commerce. I don't want to say something specific. So let's say I'm offering flowers, and I would like to search them. Our users to search them. I guess, can you propose sort of a framework of thought how I should approach the crowdsourcing? So let's say, what should I focus on? Can I choose a metric, offline metric that you will recommend? Would you like to, do you think that there is some specific thing that I could try to connect with my business goals, like a metric that will be reflective of my business goals? Or would you start with just something like, I don't know, NDCG or whatever, and go from there?
Oof, it's a very, very, very long topic to discuss, but let's start from somewhere. So in my perspective, like, of course, like you're doing your engine, it's at some point, of course, you're implementing some like online labeling, online evaluation, and like you have somewhere to start. And here you come into the position where you need to do some offline labeling. So there is like this, I would say, like a circle, which in the parts of which you can depict your pipeline as a circle which goes in infinity, and it has the several parts. So it has the ranking part when you're deciding like about like how you want to perform your ranking. What is your ranking means? What do you want to show the most? What is your how many positions people do see? What do you want them to see the first? What is relevant? What is irrelevant? And you're like selecting some end-to-end metric that you want to use. And there are like usually some popular metrics you noticed, like NDCG. So like these cumulative gain metrics is a very popular and nice way to start there. There are like even like more simple ones, just evaluating about the precision and recall of your position of the elements arising in your like ranking list resulting. And there can be even more sophisticated approaches like expected reciprocal rank, for example, metrics, if you heard of it. It's like more cascade approach, because you know that people are not clicking through after some certain position. But think we're talking about flowers, I would say it's more about like image search, simple one, which has like some certain type of definitive answers, and it's not like people are going to it's like with searching some items when you're like finding what you desire and then you're not scrolling down. Maybe with flowers you just want to see. So I would say see them, like download them or something. So I would say NDCG sounds pretty good at the beginning as a basics, and then you can adapt these metrics based on what are you really interested in. Maybe you have some advertisements on some of the flowers or something. Then the next part, after you defined what are you want to do, for example, you like which metric you want to evaluate, what do you want to see, like what do you want to compare, you think about like what do you need for human labeling, how do you need to sample data, what will be the result, how you need to aggregate it, and how do you need to like use this information in your product. And then it comes like, for example, for NDCG, you usually need some ideal ranking to compare your ranking to. So here comes exactly the crowdsourcing, the manual labeling, because you can gather this ideal ranking from them and then do a comparison on the your real search engine answers. So, okay, we defined the goal. We want an ideal ranking of flowers by this query. And not one query, because like, for example, just one query is kind of, I don't know, super simple, and you want to evaluate it in general. So here comes the sampling, and how you can approach sampling of your queries and the results of your search engine can be very different. You can just try to sample the most popular flowers and queries, but it's usually not the best approach, just because like the most popular queries are usually very well handled, and they are very simple, because like when the people are matching in their desires, it means that it's not a very complicated thing. So there is like a huge tail of very rare queries which you also want to consider, I guess, in evaluation, in like, ideal ranking. So here comes like two techniques, for example, reservoir sampling or even like stratified sampling. I would say I mostly recommend using stratified sampling, adapted by like your own analytics of the situation and your own needs. This one allows to like to very like shortly explain it without like digging deep. It's just you have like your own data, the whole amount of these queries with their like how often they're asked, how popular they are, and you're doing like some bins of them based on the popularity, and you try to sample equally from the each bin, but these bins are different sized based on the general popularity of items. So we have the kind of like you're kind of modeling the distribution of the data in your engine by sampling like this. So after you have this data sampled, you need to think how to present it to like manual labeling. What do you want to ask you? Like you want some ideal ranking, yes. There is an option to give them like, for example, query and the like the first 10 or 20 results that your engine returns. It depends like how many results depends on the click-through rate, which you can like, for example, estimate by you have a data about how users click, how far they click in your like length of your search results, and you can estimate that after like, I don't know, 15th position, it's not interesting usually to anyone, so you cannot worry about it very much. But here, like you see, if you're giving the whole list to end user in crowdsourcing and saying, okay, rank me from like the most relevant to least relevant, as I was saying before, decomposition is very important. And this task of ranking is very hard because even like I am having like some degree, like I have bachelor's and master's. I think I am generally like educated person to some extent. I'm not sure, but if somebody says to me, okay, this is the flower like this, there is 15 pictures, can you please rank them from the most suitable to the least suitable, I will be all like, oh my god, I can't do that because it's too much. So there's like other approaches, either like taking a specific item which returned by your system, taking a query and answering, are they like relevant or irrelevant together? Is it a matching or unmatching pair? It's much simpler. It's very good, understandable by the crowd. But the problem is that here you can't kind of compare items with the same relevancy, because like it says like, okay, this relevant and this relevant, and you're like, okay, what should I put on top, this one or this one? You can ask people to give like some percentage of relevancy from their head, but still different people think differently, so it's kind of hard very much to aggregate the results. So the most nice approach, I would say, would be a pairwise comparisons. So you're like giving a query, you're giving two answers, and you says, okay, what suits better? And then by these pairwise comparisons, you can do a whole ranking then by aggregating these pairwise comparisons in the manner of the list, with like from the most relevant part to the least relevant. And of course, if you're doing this pairwise comparisons honestly, like how it's supposed to be, it's n squared amount of entities, which is like tons of entities. So usually our suggestion is to do like more in the quick sort or like other sort manner with n log n. So like doing a hard estimation of these pairwise comparisons, sampling a little bit less, but still you can like have in the end the pretty good estimated like ranking list. So you grade this assignment, you have these pairwise comparisons, you have the results, you can estimate the quality of results based by how like this particular user is good with these particular assignments. And then you're aggregating it. There are like some models that you can use for aggregating, for example, like mathematical models, statistical models, like for example, Bradley-Cherry or something. We did it actually in our CrowdKit. It's a thing for pretty much, we try to do an open library in Python for every type of crowdsourcing annotations, not only Toloka ones. So you can implement it yourself, or for example, take some library, even ours. And then you got your ideal ranking as you desired, and you can compute the metrics like compared to your ideal ranking. So how good your search engine returns like on these samples and these samples, how good are the results of these flowers, how relevant they are. And then you see like what is the overall result. It might be good or not very good. If it's not very good, you, for example, can select some domains when you see the most mistakes and try to like ask the crowd or in some separate projects, domain wise, like where are the mistakes exactly? Maybe you have problems with like defining the color of this flower, or maybe you have problems with like good lighting on the photos, and you can figure out what is exactly the problem. And yeah, you can use this manual labeling firstly for evaluating the metrics from time to time and to see how your search engine improves with like including new features and changing the searching algorithms. And you can also train on this manually labeled data your ML models, which perform ranking. So I would say it works kind of like this.
Yeah, this is great. It does sound like a very structured process, what you explained. But I do want to drill into maybe a couple of specifics. So one is, I believe NDCG is definitely, I think it's prosa that, in principle, if I was communicating this to some management in my team, I could say that yesterday we were at 75% and today we're at 76%. So we are improving, right? And this is on a percent scale. If I remove the letter N from this formula, then this becomes like an absolute scale, and there is no way to tell, are we progressing or are we regressing? But at the same time, again, wearing my devil's advocate suit here for a moment, NDCG has a problem that if, let's say, I have a scale of labels from 0 to 3, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3. So 0 meaning completely irrelevant result, and 3 meaning completely relevant perfect result. If I receive 2 ratings, one with all ones, right? So all ones, and the other one is with all 3s. So all ones, it's kind of like a suboptimal result, nothing better in the list, but at the same time not perfect. And the other one is absolutely perfect. NDCG yields exactly the same number, because if only if we you rightly mentioned about optimal perfect ranking. So if my perfect ranking equals in length exactly the visible labeled area, then the formula in DCG will yield 100% in both cases. And this is kind of like a problem. And you touched on this in that part where you say that we need to make sure to construct this perfect order of results, right? So how long it should be? Let's say if I show 10 flowers on the screen, 10 bouquets, whatever, how long that perfect list should be? 30, 100? Is there any recommendation?
I would say, like, as I mentioned before, firstly, you can use the metrics, which is like expected reciprocal rank, which is exactly talking about the moment when the user lose attention. And after that, you can make mistakes, but they're just not reaching it. And for evaluation, this, like the moment of the termination of the interest, you can exactly, I think, pre-evaluate it with like if you have some any data, you can pre-evaluate it by the clicks. So you can give like any item some weight by the reach through in general, and then just predict in general how much like general user, how many items your general users like look through before they're satisfied with the result. And maybe over time this actually amount will be decreased because your ranking will be more perfect. But you also can try to emulate the same experiments with actually the crowdsourcing, and just to see how, like, to give them some certain amount of objects. Why I'm talking about this actually, because recently when we had this talk about biases, the presenter, for testing his hypothesis on the click-through, he created a project in Toloka where he had like the query movie and the recommendations, which were like around 20 or like 30, and he looked, are they clicking through until some, I mean, they also were like ordered like in the search engine, and he looked like how far they're clicking through to check the hypothesis of the position bias. So in general, you can also try to test your hypothesis online with the click metrics and see how to like choose this position, and then test it offline. But one additional thing, when we're talking about business, we're in general also talking about budgets. So of course, the more you need to evaluate, still the cost will rise, just because you're offering more data to crowd, and crowd needs to to do more assignments, so it's becoming more costly. So I would say I would like estimate the amount that you need, that you not that you need, the amount of the click-through, and then maybe cut it based on your general estimate the costs of manual labeling and try to align them a little bit, because still I would say the result might be not like 100% perfect, in the means that people are reaching like farther and seeing the mistakes, but it still will be a big improvement if you catch a mistake in the top ranking positions.
Yeah, I think connected to this, there is a notion of disagreement between annotators, right? So what is relevant for you might be completely irrelevant to me, and I want to see for the same query, I want to see the results in different order. I think one of the suggestions I've heard of how you could construct this perfect list is actually you can take and concatenate all of the rankings given by independent annotators for the same query, and then resort them in the order that makes it perfect from the top to the bottom. Of course, you will still have issues with ties, right? So if you have three threes, then how should you order them? But at least they will be visible on the screen, so maybe that's fine. Or maybe not, who knows? But at the same time, you kind of like achieve this perfect list, which incorporates the wisdom or the wishes of other people that have been in the same sort of group. Have you experimented something around these lines, or do you think it's sensible to do this?
To experiment with which part? With checking who I'm working with, or with reordering, or with your hypothesis?
With constructing your perfect list, right? Because for NDCG, you need that perfect list to divide by, right, in the formula.
Yeah. So have we experimented with the length of this list, you're asking me?
No, in this case, I think I'm actually describing that specific way of building it, that you take sublists from different people that annotated the same query, then you stack them together, and then you sort them, right?
It's very interesting approach. I would say that I myself never experienced such of a technique, which sounds very interesting, but we're usually just doing, like, I usually did more like aggregation by the models which are not like concatenating, but that taking into the account in the general the quality of the user in this ranking problem. And so when you're doing an aggregation, you're just like more lean towards a user who are proficient in ranking in general. So you trust him as an end-to-end good user of the search. So for example, when one person said all threes and one said all ones, but I know that this three guy is in general good at this, I will just take his one as an ideal labeling.
Yeah, this is the exciting part. You're tapping into the topic of quality of annotators, which is super, super important. At the same time, you could teach the annotators if you have them in-house, but if you have them external, you kind of do not have control over who gets what task. So how exactly maybe Toloka, or what kind of methodology should I apply to measure the quality of each annotator? What are the components there?
It's actually, like, I would say it's a very, very like, it's a very big system, and that means that you need to not only measure quality, but also like keep your projects protected from the fraud and from the people who specifically want to break quality. Not just they're like making a human mistakes, but they are really, really trying to scam with your data. So there are like different techniques, starting from the super simple ones, like anti-fraud ones, which are like looking how fast are you labeling, are you labeling with the same non-human distribution of the labels, like clicking only like one option until it just goes forever, or like even sometimes it's checking of how you're like how is your behaviors like in general with like different projects, with annotating maybe how your mouse works or something like this. So it's this, and also there are like, of course, general exams, checking your language proficiency, checking your proficiency in writing, checking your proficiency in some other skills, which are also building up some certain, I would say, portrait of a good labeler. Because if you're like able to provide the good results in some skills which are like around this problem, like you're good with this or this, that means that you're in general won't be at least a frauder, and you have a chance to succeed in these tasks. And then the main mechanism which is used in the most of the tasks where you have categories, like classification or something, when we're working with categorical tasks, we know the ground truth answer. It, of course, doesn't happen with ranking, because with ranking, we don't know, like it's a very subjective manner. What do you prefer, this or this? But with but you can, of course, actually create an obvious examples, like very obvious. So when you know like some ground truth, you can hide, you can shuffle in this examples of the tasks with the answers which you know, and you can like hiddenly shuffle them in between the assignments, so people will complete them without noticing it, because like it's hidden by the API and everything. And by the percentage of the examples that they evaluated correctly, you can kind of estimate their skills, because you know that like in general for this class they're giving the right answers. And the second technique, which also works good for the more creative, I would say, or gathering assignments, for example, when you need to take a picture or when you need to do an assignment outdoors, for example, go and check there is like a building on some certain place for like a maps up. There you can do even more tricky thing and tell the crowd, evaluate the other crowd. So you're creating a specific validation project with the other crowdsourcers, and you're giving them the answers of the first crowdsourcers, and you say, okay, guys, now you need to evaluate. Does it look correct to you? Does it look like not a fraud and everything? And there, by this double evaluation, you're actually sorting out all of the problems.
Wow, I have never
Yeah.
heard of such method. It's amazing. I think more traditionally, like maybe like 10 years ago, in project related to sentiment analysis, we were talking about double annotation, but at the same time. So you give the same, the same label, and then you ask the human to whether they agree or not, but twice, and then you basically calculate the inter-annotator agreement. But what you just described is so brilliantly put and sort of invented in a way. Was this invented at Toloka, or have you seen this somewhere in the...
To be honest, I don't know. If we did that, I am super happy. But it doesn't seem like rocket science, yeah, but it works.
Yeah.
And also about in inter-annotator agreement also works, especially in like some classification tasks. That's how we actually started creating these hidden assignments recently. Like as I told about them, we are called them honeypots, or the golden assignment, the one with the hidden tasks, which you're like shuffle in the data and then evaluate the result, the skills of people who are doing some certain kinds of assignments. And actually, also we're saving these skills, and sometimes you can access them because they're already on platform. They're called global skills, so you can just pre-select on your project people who already succeed in moderation, for example. That actually helped me recently a lot because I didn't have to train the crowd for my very complex task. So but I stepped aside. So before, like when I was even working with Toloka some time ago, you had to create these specific tasks yourself. Like this hidden, you had to manually label them, and that took some time, and it was like kind of tiring because you're sitting here and you're creating like 100, like usually you need some certain amount of some sample of this task, like at least 5% of the general like amount of the tasks on your platform, on your project, to evaluate how good the people are. Because if you're like giving them 100 items to label, and once you're asking like if it's correct or not, you can't evaluate if this person is good or bad. It can be just the pure luck. So labeling it by yourself was kind of time consuming and sad. And recently we decided, okay, but we have crowd. Why do we are doing the job of the crowd? Let's just create these hidden tasks by the other crowd, and we can do this easily just using the interhuman agreement. You're just giving them a task, and you're pre-selecting the crowd with the good skills in the past, just in general, so you trust them more. And you throw, for example, 10 people on one tiny bit of a task, and 10 people like labeling it without knowing what the others said. And then, like, to have better than one, usually some certain amount of the strong agreement comes, and you know that is the right answer, and you can directly pick it and already shuffle it in the other project. So you see, it's we're making the self-working mechanisms. Like, you just throw some data in, you receive the results.
Yeah, it's like self-reinforcement, or I think this is amazing, and And it also is surfacing, I believe, like a feature of Toloka that you cannot get with, let's say, you set up an open source labeling tool, that you can having a specific task like moderation or I don't know, sentiment, whatever, machine translation, that you can actually ask and gather a group that will be proficient in that specific space. So, because otherwise you're going to be wasting cycles in potentially teaching
Funny.
people, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think this is something that now that we started to say in the beginning of the podcast that data is important, but also humans that annotate is important, are important. Yeah, absolutely. This is great. I still wanted to understand one building block. You were talking about aggregation. Can you again sort of restate this? What do you mean, and what should I pay attention to as a user of such a platform?
So for example, like there are different ways of annotating data, and sometimes you need like there can be different cases when you need aggregation. So aggregation is like, just imagine that you receive some raw results from the human annotators, and then you need to aggregate them in some final answer that you will use for your model or for something. It can be different cases when you need it. For example, as we were talking about the like aggregation between humans on the some task. For example, you have a task of labeling pictures of a cat or dog, and you decide that you wanna like 4 annotators look at it, and 3 of them said it's a cat, and the one said that it's a dog, and you have these 4 answers. And to understand that it's a cat, you need to perform an aggregation. So if it comes to classification tasks, it's pretty easy. I mean, you can do just major vote or like major vote weighted by the skills of those people. But when it comes, for example, for aggregating like images, like for example, you're doing a segmentation and you need to aggregate different answers about the segmentations. Here it's already harder because like doing like a major vote pixel wise, it's a little bit of a hard work, you know. So for that, usually there are like some models which are pre-designed and used and studied in crowd science. So aggregation of audio, aggregation of image, and also aggregation of these pairwise comparisons that I was talking about, because this is specifically a hard task because you have these pairwise assignments, and sometimes it's like A better than B, B better than C, but C better than A, and you're having a cycle and you don't know what to do. So for that, there are existing a couple of models which are based, for example, noisy Bradley theory, which are based on the expectation maximization algorithm, which assumes that laborers are actually by their skill know the ground truth of the answers, and we're trying to estimate that to get as possible as close to that paradigm with like a couple of iterations of this model. And in the end, it just gives you away the list of responses. Like, for example, if we're counting an NDCG or some other metric, we just need a list where it says like item 1 is the best, item 10 is the worst. So the aggregation is out of this, all of the pairwise comparisons. It will give you that list. You can implement these aggregations yourself and study them, because like in crowd, like we're not the first ones doing crowdsourcing actually. So they're like in crowd science, there are like a lot of models presented, and our research team actually also studying them and implementing them, and I hope improving them. I hope I'm not praising them too much. But
You can. It's your moment of
okay, our
thank you.
research team is great. Yeah, but yeah, we, for example, for aggregation, we just created a tool which can be used paired with a platform, so you don't have to think much how does it work. But if you want, write me and I can provide you with papers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And all the papers that you mentioned during this podcast, I really would love to include as show notes as well, because I see how the listeners find the episodes educational, and some of them spend a lot of time, listening through and and then reading the papers as well, or at least browsing through them. So Jen, it's so much stuff you have shared so far, and I think even those who are using open source tools like, I don't know, Cupid or Label Studio, and others, I'm sure they can learn from what you said, but I also hope that they will improve their practices by tapping into the talent behind Toloka. But there is one topic that I think keeps surfacing everywhere, but also to some degree it becomes an overheated discussion around bias and data, and how this can actually drive the inequalities in life and in the world. And I think by the virtue of us being in this space, we should resist this as much as possible. But I wanted to pick your brain on what is bias for you and how you have seen or maybe discussed this in the email projects.
I really like this topic because, yeah, I recently hosted a panel discussion about biases, and I love hosting a panel discussions because you can come, you can know zero about the subject, you can ask the stupidest questions to the most awesome engineers in the field, and you're returning super educated. So maybe I'll try to just to recreate what people from this panel discussion in Berlin said to me. But as far from my understanding, there are like not two types of biases, but I consider them as the two types of biases. The one is ethical bias, more related to the stuff which is like the things that we shouldn't be biased on, but we are biased because of the historical data or like some other unfair results of the history. So it's like the bias of the skin color, the bias of the gender, the bias of some other, and they're here and there in the sadly in the big models. For example, like even the DALL-E and GPT-3 and everything. Sadly, it seems they're learning on the internet available data, and the internet is a very toxic space sometimes, especially like I still like the stories of the chatbots which were like learned on Twitter, and then they are like so offensive that nobody can leave them out in the open like business communication world. So these models, of course, have these ethical biases, and that should be controlled very much. And that's why we have like the fairness topic in the AI, and that's exactly like I studied it recently. I love my master's because I'm revisiting all of the topics in the ML, so I'm feeling like when I'm talking about it, I'm feeling like I am literally coming from the academic background, even if it's just a master's. And the fairness algorithms, they're like pretty much set up how you can evaluate, how you can try to make your data less biased or just test it on the fairness. But yeah, it's still here, sadly. And the second thing, and of course there are approaches how to avoid it fully, but sadly we're constructing new biases here and there. So we're getting rid of the one and we're constructing new. And the second one, they're more like behavioral biases. Maybe they're like less harmful in the general, because I consider ethical biases being very harmful. Like when we're creating AI systems related to jurisdiction or like to some other things, these biases can be crucial. And also, by the way, the same biases. I remember the story about COVID. With the COVID, when people tried, it's not like that ethical bias, but it's a bias, and it was very crucial. So when with COVID, people tried to, at the beginning when it started and everybody was panicking, so people started to thinking maybe they can do something AI, like some ML model, which will help to recognize if the person has pneumonia, like is it like caused by COVID or not in the lungs. And there already was data from China because it started earlier there. And there were like a lot of AI and ML engineers working on that. But the problem was that the data was biased and it wasn't cleaned and sorted out because people didn't have so much time. I mean, it was very like a crucial moment. So because of that, models were working very biased and bad because they, for example, were predicting that if the person on the like the scan, if the person is kind of in the position of lying, she or he, then they have COVID. But if it's in the standing position, they don't have it, just because the people who were lying and taking photos, they were just in the worst medical condition in general, because like when you can't stand up, that means that you're pretty ill, you know. So it was just a bias in the data because it was unbalanced, and that is the result of bias which you need to monitor and control. Well, that's why you can't leave it in the open world. And yeah, so the behavioral biases, it's more like about when, like, for example, with the search engine, I think I touched it, the position bias. It's when you're just trained to click on the like first three elements that you see, because you're so overwhelmed with information that you don't have like a power to go through the tens of pages and select what exactly do you want. Or there are like some other biases. For example, we know that one behavior thing that people have, it's interesting thing. It's called choice overload. It's like when in recommendation systems, people actually, like in restaurants, people prefer to see something with a bigger menu, with a bigger recommendation, because they think, oh, it's enriched, it's nice, I would love it. But the more choice you have, the more cost you're spending on decision, your inner cost, your evaluation cost. And at some point, it becomes just not feasible, not useful. Like you need less items to select better choice. At some point, you just lose attention and everything. And that's another like thing which comes from our behavior, and which biases a lot of instruments, and which biases a lot of like models, and which we need to take into account, or otherwise we won't be successful with implementing it.
Yeah, absolutely. On this paralysis of choice, would you think that reducing the number of options would bias our system in some way? Like, strictly speaking, do we actually introduce bias by reducing the number of options?
Oh, I'm pretty sure we do. But like, as I said, sometimes you can use biases like, not all of the biases, I would say they're that harmful. Sometimes you can just like try to use them for like having more good outcome. Of course, I'm not talking about the ethical biases. God, no. But with like, for example, with reducing the choice amount, of course, you are biased people towards like the what you offer. For example, it depends on what you offer in this limited choice. And if you're like offering them the most popular, of course, they can be stuck in the pool of selecting the same items without changing their preferences, which they would like to. But in general, for them, it would be easier to select something that they really prefer by the whole characteristics. So even biasing people here, you're actually kind of helping them with the choice process. So I would say it was a general recommendation, like after 10 or 15 items, as far as I recall, your choice overload becomes too much. So you just can't. Like, you know, I hate these restaurants when you have in the menu sushi, pizza, Indian food, Mexican food. You're got, oh my God, I'm so hungry, but I can't choose.
Yeah, it's like no focus and maybe no face of the restaurant in a way, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure there are customers who are like in haste and they don't have time to drill and understand what is this local cuisine here. Just give me that pizza or burger or whatever, and I will flip through the menu, right? But I really wanted to relate to what you said, and I think bias is not always negative, and I think it's important to understand that sometimes in certain circumstances it could be actually bringing positive impact, and the example you gave is one of that, right? So but at the same time, whatever I show on the screen in the search engine, and you already talked about it, it's a click bias, right? What I show in that order, you know, in majority of countries in the world will go top to bottom, left to right, and we will click in that order. But at the same time, anything that I say, for example, now, I already bias you to think in that direction. And if I choose another strategy and I start talking about snow or something else, your mind will tune to a completely different topic, right? And you will be biased again without realizing that I do this. So the same actually will apply, I think, to the annotation and labeling project, right? So whatever I show, in which order I show, which questions I ask, will bias the annotators to, besides all other factors, like if I overload with them with questions, they will be tired and really not give me value. But if I didn't do that, the order of the tasks might bias them and many other items. Can you talk a bit more about that? And also, is there some silver bullet that can solve this or at least improve?
Okay, from my position, which is a very, very subjective opinion, I would say bias is a very human thing. So even creating like a big sentient AI perfect model trained on purely human data in the amount that we have it now, even if we increase the amount, we can't get rid of the biases which we are so afraid of. So we need to go to some system with robots creating robots, and then maybe we'll get rid of our own biases. Because as you know, human factor, it's a really like a thing. We're just making mistakes sometimes just because we're like not as perfect and attentive, so we're just biased at this. But I would say with the human labeling, you see, you're doing product from biased humans to biased humans. So at least the thing, that's why I was talking about the explicitity. Like when you're predicting something by their clicks in the online experiments, you're introducing even more, like you're introducing a third person in this chain, a developer who does assumptions about others people biases sometimes without knowing their culture, or like as you said, in search engines we read like from top to bottom, from left to right, but sometimes in some cultures they have different way of writing, from reading from right to left, or maybe they have like designing there are different people which like different types of the search, like based on age. Maybe sometimes some people are like seeing less, or there are people with color blindness and they need some other results, because like it's also depends on how do you see everything. So when only one person like assumes, especially developer, like I was asking on the panel a question like, should we all be psychologists and philosophers to create the systems? Because like when the developer decides what to do, it sometimes this person is not educated about like psychology of the human behavior and it might give some mistakes. So that's why I think human labeling wins. It's not like there are people who are like psychologists and philosophers, but you are giving the same task to the same crowd. You can like do a pre-filtering of the crowd, for example, by the same target audience that you're interested in, by the language, by the culture, by the interests, by like, for example, you have a com for flowers, select people who like flowers, like who work with flowers, or ask them, do you like flowers? And then send them to this task. And by this, you're at least like trying to model the same behavior with actual like people, by this having the same distribution, like maybe small like subsample of the same distribution of people for your target users, and you're not deciding for them yourself. So I would say the best recommendation is to think about filtering your crowd for your assignments, thinking of who you want to be satisfied by your product, and asking the people related to that to do the evaluation, to do the testing.
Yeah, it's just one thought came to mind, that in principle, if we considered, annotation process as building some kind of mathematical function that we're trying to, with which we're trying to fit into the reality, then in principle, we could have built a perfect annotation, composition project that would fit into the reality, replicate the same biases that exist today, and earn money, right? That would be kind of the wrong way to go. I hope companies do not consider doing that, right?
I need to say that even I think even Toloka, if I am not mistaken, it actually uses as a support a little bit of machine learning labeling. So we're learning on our crowd in each project, and we're like providing some sub labeling with the machine learning, which learned by the biases of the target auditory and tries to emulate the same behavior. But it's still not like the evil sentient AI robotics because it's mostly manually labeled. But I need to know, no, I need to mention that also humans who are like labeling assignments, sometimes they are very educated and very smart, and they are very willing to crack the system. And actually, when you want to crack the system, you're becoming super talented. So I saw some people creating some algorithms which are labeling the assignments for them, emulating the human time of labeling, human way of like moving the mouse, a human way of understanding instruction. And recently I was asked how we're blocking this type of people, but I'm saying why to block this type of people? They're getting so close to actual labeling that I wouldn't even stop them.
Yeah, I'm sure we can learn from them because and you already touched on this topic that another big area of research is how we can, I believe it's called gamification, or like you break the machine learning model by supplying certain sequence of actions and input such that it will unlock some doors or whatever, right? Maybe you receive a loan that you are not supposed to and things like that. Yeah, this is interesting. And do you think, I'm asking the same question as I see on your event, do you think that unbiased data is attainable? So there is a zero bias.
To be honest, I don't think so. I don't believe so. I might be incorrect, and the experts said like different experts like who was sitting with me on the panel discussion, and I of course I asked the same question because it's very interesting. Like, is it only our thing? Why we're in this loop of creating and fixing biases, like like a chipmunk? But um, I personally don't think so because like a bias is a very human thing where you can try to get rid of one, you're creating another, but it's not bad. It's not bad. We just need to get rid of the actually like dangerous biases like ethic and other ones. And with the rest, we just need to understand how to deal with them. And as humans, we can recognize some biases which are harmful, and that's good. That's why, for example, we need the manual evaluation of the AI systems which are trained now, because they're very like nicely trained, but they are producing biases and they can't detect what they're doing. So sometimes they can be harmful. So that's why, like from my perspective, big models alone still can't be like used now, even if they're existing and they're like impressing us very much. They need some on top verification.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where the human labeling comes in. I think the flip side, or if I would flip around my question about getting or your question rather, of getting the completely unbiased set, you could also say, could we actually source the data set that contains all the little biases or little diversities that exist in the world, right? Or maybe not, okay, not in the world, but in that domain of operation that you are in your business. And maybe formulating it that way gives me a lever to start thinking, okay, what is it that I'm missing in the data? And of course, this is the most challenging question, to know what I don't know, what I'm missing, right? So it's equally hard, but it's probably more in the trajectory of amassing the data set.
I would say that I actually heard some approaches which are working on that, like specifically taking into account very biased data on the like in the domain, and seeing how your algorithm will perceive it, and actually catching the mistakes by it. Because yeah, we have we can account the bias data, and there are like some guidelines how to notice biases in your data or models. So here we can try to at least approach this task from your perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. Hey, Jenny, I really enjoyed talking to you, and I think we could talk forever on this topic. But I really love asking the question of why, which is tapping into your motivation. You did say in the beginning that, all the stars positioned correctly in a way, and you got the dream job. But at the same time, you still wake up every morning and you say, okay, what will I do today? What drives me? Why it drives me? So what drives you to do what you do, data advocate, NML?
I would say I don't want to like start a story with reflecting on how I woke up one day and realized that my heart belongs to AI and everything. But I would say like a little moments in my life where I had to write an essay about can computers think when I was applying to university, when I had to explain to my parents what is AI and why I'm doing it. When I compared the other like positions, when I saw some questions which people in general like asking C and DALI and GPT-3, when I visited some industrial conferences and compared them with the researching conferences and noticed that people are fascinated by the models and the architectures but when it comes to like taking it down to development and to actually helping people struggle with doing some simple things like not simple but basic things like providing the data, not interesting, they're like they sound less interesting but they're actually very crucial, like providing the right data, curing the bias, monitoring it, not just creating a proof of concept. It bugged me so much because I see so many cool models, ideas, architectures around creating like insane applications, but not always they're coming to production and not always they're start like helping people and everything. And I would say I really would love to, I love to in general like seeing something starting working like it's a very satisfactory thing. So I choose my my path I would say to approach people with talking about data and how can it help actually to train the models and make them closer to the production, make them closer to being actually here and working good and helping people out with these magnificent ideas created by researchers.
Oh yeah, that sounds so cool. Very deep. Thank you for sharing this. It's like I think in many ways it's like the dream maybe of um, creating that companion that can think the same way we think, and it's not human, um, because we could also as a humanity we do reproduce and so on, but we also challenge ourselves and others in what is possible, what are the limits of our intelligence, or are there any tasks that are still waiting there to be solved and can be solved with AI. I think it's magnificent for
It's
sure.
magnificent. I am waiting to see if somebody, some model will finally win the Loebner Prize and pass the Turing test. So I'm
Yeah.
voting for ChatGPT.
Yes, maybe it will be fine-tuned on something like
Yeah.
flower search or something.
Yeah. On human
uh,
labeling with Toloka, I am pretty sure.
yes, exactly. And yeah, and traditionally, of course, we will link everything we can link about Toloka, but if you were to announce something to the audience, maybe how they can get closer to the platform, start playing around. What can you?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I have three things that I really want to announce. Firstly, it's to, if you want to talk about just like, do we need manual labeling? Do you need manual labeling? Do you need data labeling? Do you need transfer learning with crowdsourcing? Do you want to just use crowdsourcing and think about it? To join our community, because we talk just in general there about ML stuff, about AI, about crowdsourcing, about data centric and model centric approach. And there we can concretely talk about like some topics which concern to you, to your company, or like to your business. and just talk. And also we have two initiatives for like education and for researchers. If somebody is interested to check some hypotheses on crowdsourcing, for example, some questionnaires, some ethical stuff, some gathering of the data sets for your own tool, or like you want to create some education or like to teach a course over the crowdsourcing to your students. We have two forms for applications where we can provide you some promo codes of using crowdsourcing for free and to play around and maybe to start liking it as I do. And I truly like it because like when you can gather a 12K data set in one day, you start liking it.
This is mind blowing.
So yeah, that's me. That's it. Thank you very much,
That's
Dima. Thank you.
fantastic.
That was magical. Thank you. I'm
Thank
sorry
you,
for
Jenny.
being like a very talkative person, but I'm always like this, so be afraid of me.
No, it's your character, it's your energy, it's your experience, and it's something that speaks up. Beside you controlling it, I think it's important. It's amazing, and that's how it should be. I think I really, really enjoyed talking to you, Jenny, today. I hope this is not the last time. We can record another one and another one. And all the best with your Christmas vacation.
Oh, thank you.
And recharging, and all the best with Toloka or
Thank you
Toloka.
very much.
I keep emphasizing
You can
all
do
the syllables.
you can do it however you like. Actually, we approve.
Yeah, thank you, and I hope the audience got that magic tune as well, and everyone will also have time to recharge during the Christmas and New Year break, and we will continue from here. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Bye bye.